Watching the classic run of Doctor Who has never been easier. In the UK, almost every story is on the iPlayer, free for everyone to watch. In other countries, it's available on BritBox or Pluto TV, or you just have to buy the DVDs or Blu-rays. But if you do have access to iPlayer, there's 26 years of episodes to choose from, and hundreds of stories, so you may be wondering where to start. Well, I spent the last few years watching a lot of them. Look back through my channel for full reviews. And in this video, I'll be taking you through the whole run from 1963 to 1989, telling you which stories you can't miss and which ones you can safely skip. You may want to start at the beginning with the first story, An Unearthly Child. Unfortunately, at the time of recording, it's not on the iPlayer due to rights issues, so you will have to buy the DVD box set at the beginning if you want to watch that. Or you can just start with the Daleks, the second story to air. You missed the introduction of the characters, but you can soon catch up. Basically, the Doctor is an old man, played by William Hartnell. He has a granddaughter, Susan, played by Carol Ann Ford, and she is followed home by two of her teachers, Ian, played by William Russell, and Barbara, played by Jacqueline Hill. They all end up in a police box in a junkyard, which turns out to be a time machine that whisks them through time and space. So that's really all you need. For those not familiar with 1960s television, I should warn you it can be very slow by today's standards. It's all in black and white. It was shot in studios on very small sets, and it was recorded as live, so it's like watching a stage play. Plus there is the added problem that a lot of episodes are still missing from the archives. Some of them have been reconstructed using animations, but the quality of them does vary from story to story, so it's not an ideal fix. And there are still a lot of gaps, so watching it through can be a frustrating experience. I myself took a break from my walkthrough for at least a year in the middle of the 60s, because it can be a bit of a slog. So if you want to just skip ahead to the 70s, I completely understand. All that being said, the original crew is one of the best TARDIS teams, and their earlier adventures are definitely worth seeing. Most of their stories are still in the archive, so it's a good run to watch. In Season 2, we get the Dalek invasion of Earth, another must-see story that writes out Susan. She is replaced in the next story by Maureen O'Brien as Vicky, who is no relation to the Doctor, but basically serves the same role. Ian and Barbara also leave in the chase, which is another Dalek story, and Peter Purvis joins as Stephen. And the series ends with the Time Meddler, another strong story with the evil meddling monk interfering in Earth's history. Series 3 is a lot harder to watch. Most of it is missing from the archives, so companions come and go with little visual record of them. But you can just skip ahead to the end and jump back into the story with the War Machines. It's the first story set in present-day London. They bring in some groovy new companions, there's nightclub scenes, location filming, and it all feels a lot more contemporary than some of the earlier episodes. Season 4 has the 10th planet, which is the first appearance of the Cybermen, and at the end, William Hartnell regenerates into Patrick Troughton, who is much more quirky and fun, but also more proactive in fighting evil. He really sets the standard for all the Doctors that come after him. Sadly, most of his stories are full of missing episodes, but if you can handle the occasional animated reconstruction, there are some classic stories in there, such as The Power of the Daleks, The Fatal Swans, The Evil of the Daleks. In Season 5 you get The Tomb of the Cybermen, which is complete, and also The Enemy of the World, which is a crazy James Bond-style spy thriller, with helicopters, crazy twists, and Patrick Troughton playing the villain with an incredible accent. And there's The Web of Fear with Yeti in the subway tunnels, which is another standout story. In Season 6 we have The Mind Robber, which is more of a surreal fantasy full of storybook characters. The Invasion, an epic action story where Cybermen invade London. And finally, The War Games, a 10-part story full of twists and turns, which ends with the first appearance of the Time Lords as they put the Doctor on trial and exile him to Earth. This is also available in a cut-down colorised version if you don't want to sit through all 10 parts. There used to be one of those for the Daleks, but it's not there anymore, so it must have expired. So watch The War Games in colour while you still can. Season 7 aired in 1970, and is another good jumping on point. From now on, there's no more missing episodes, and it's all in full colour. Jon Pertwee takes over as the Doctor, a dashing man of action who's also rather pompous and arrogant. He's now been exiled to Earth and works with units to battle alien threats. There's a lot more location shooting than before, lots of action scenes, lots of stunts. It really feels like a whole different show. The standout stories there are Spearhead from Space, which is shot on film, so still looks great, and Inferno, where the Doctor travels to a parallel Earth where everybody is evil, like the one in Peacemaker. In Season 8 we get the introduction of the Master, played by Roger Delgado, who's the Doctor's evil nemesis, and Katie Manning plays Jo Grant, the Doctor's assistant for most of his run. The best ones in this season are the Claws of Axos, where Earth is invaded by seemingly benevolent aliens, and the Daemons, a kind of folk horror with witches and devils in an old English village. In season 9, we get a rare visit to an alien planet with the Curse of Peladon, and also one of the best Earthbound stories with the Sea Devils. Season 10 starts with the Three Doctors, which brings all three Doctors back together, although William Hartnell is barely in it. After this is Frontier in Space, a Star Trek-style space opera, and it ends with Joe Grant's departure in The Green Death, which has some very emotional scenes, as well as a bonkers story with giant maggots and an evil computer. Season 11 introduces Elizabeth Sladen as Sarah Jane Smith, who would eventually get her own spin-off series. Her debut in The Time Warrior is really good, as she is whisked back in time to fight some Taurans in medieval times. The rest of the seasons is not really up to much, so you can basically skip that. Season 12 has Tom Baker taking over as the Doctor. With his iconic hat and scarf and booming voice, he's one of the longest lasting and best remembered Doctors. This is the start of another golden age for the show. Stories such as The Ark in Space and Genesis of the Daleks are considered classics. Season 13 continues this streak with Terror of the Zygons, Brain of Morbius, Pyramids of Mars, all classic stories with a much darker tone than previously, influenced by horror tropes. In season 14, Sarah Jane leaves, and the Doctor has a solo adventure in The Deadly Assassin, which is a tale of political shenanigans on his home planet of Gallifrey, and establishes the Time Lords as a proper fleshed-out society for the first time. His next companion is Louise Jameson as the Savage Warrior Leela, and stories such as The Robots of Death and The Talons of Weng Chiang continue the streak of classics. Season 15 is when it all starts to go a bit downhill. Horror of Fang Rock is a strong start, but a new producer takes over, and the stories get less horrific and more comedic, which doesn't work nearly as well. The Robot Dog K9 also joins with TARDIS here, and he's a fixture for the next several years, but you can basically skip the rest of the season. Season 16 gets things back on track. Mary Tam joins as Romana, an intelligent, sophisticated time lady who has a much different dynamic with the Doctor than any companion before. And there is a story arc with a search for the key to time, linking every story together. The Rebus operation and the androids of Tara are the best stories here, but it's all a definite improvement on the previous year. In season 17, Lalla Ward takes over as Romana, and you have the classic story City of Death. Set on a location in Paris, with one of the best scripts ever written by Douglas Adams. It's an absolute must-see, but sadly the rest of the season is nowhere near as good. In season 18, the tone shifts and becomes darker and more serious, with scripts full of abstract scientific concepts. It's not for everyone, but I'd say it's a definite improvement on the previous few years. The high point of the E-Space trilogy, set in a parallel universe, which ends up writing out Romana and K9, and Logopolis, which is Tom Baker's final story, full of memorable images. It ends his run on a high. Peter Davison takes over as the Doctor in season 19. He's the youngest one so far and has a TARDIS full of young companions, all with their own distinctive outfits. So there's a lot of arguing and bickering going on in the TARDIS scenes, but if you can sit through all that, the highlights are Kindle with lots of surreal dream sequences, and Earthshock, an all-action adventure with the Cybermen. Season 20 has the Black Guardian trilogy, with a mini-story arc of a companion who's compelled by an evil force to try and kill the Doctor. And it's followed by the 5 Doctors, which brings back Troughton and Pertwee, among many other characters from the show's run. It's a really good celebration of the story so far. Season 21 has another epic Dalek story in Resurrection of the Daleks, and Peter Davison's final story, The Caves of Androzani, is another all-time classic. Beautifully written, full of great characters and lots of action. After this, Colin Baker takes over as the Doctor, all brash and arrogant, treating his companion and everybody else with contempt, and the stories become darker and more violent, so it's not really one that I would recommend. So unless you're a completist, just skip the whole thing. Sylvester McCoy is the final Doctor of the 1980s. As I said in last week's video, he starts out as a bit of a clown, but gets darker and more mysterious as he goes on. Basically all of season 25 and 26 are well worth watching, particularly Remembrance of the Daleks, Ghostlight and Curse of Fenric. But I've talked enough about all of those in the last few weeks, so I'm not going to go there again. And that's my guide to 26 years of classic Doctor Who. You can look back through the last few years on my channel for full reviews of most of these stories. I'm planning to carry on and cover the new Who years, but one day I might come back and do full reviews of the 60s stories, but I'll probably wait until I've done some more animated reconstructions to fill in the gaps before I go there again. Next week it's back to Sylvester McCoy as I review a bunch of his Big Finish audios. You can read my thoughts on those right now if you join my Patreon. Otherwise, I'll see you next time.